Welcome to another episode of Dad Up, everyone. Thank you guys very much for joining me. I'm excited to have this guest on. He's got a remarkable story, and I'm curious to dive into all his kind of challenges and the things he's gone through, and also about his parenting. So I'd like to welcome my good friend all the way from Germany, my good friend Carlos Baker. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, hello, hello. What's up, Bry?
How you doing, man? It's funny when the person that we were talking to said that you were in Germany. I wasn't sure if you were going to have an accent or if you were from the area or from, somewhere out there, but you're from the United States.
Yeah. Born and raised in Rhode Island, right outside of East Providence, Rhode Island, and ended up here, man. God, if you told me, I've been here for 14 years, which in itself is remarkable, but yeah, I would have never dreamed I would have ended up here. But it's been a trip. I married my college sweetheart. We met when I was just a kid. I was 18 when I met her, and she was born and raised in this little village that we ended up in. She came over as an au pair, as a nanny or whatever you call it. And so I've been with her forever, 32 years.
Wow, that's
We
awesome.
got four. Yeah, it is amazing. I adore her after all these years. We got four kids, and yeah, in 2009, we packed up our stuff. I'm sure we'll get to it, but the short story is I was going through some hard times with mental health issues. And from one day to the next, we packed up our stuff into a container, and we showed up here in this little village that has 1,500 people in it. Everybody knows everybody. And it's been the most amazing, everything in my life has been an experience like all of us, but the last 14 years have been wonderful.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I want to dive into it. My listeners, viewers who don't know who you are, let's dive into your backstory. Let's dive into, kind of how you grew up, the things that you went through as a child and all that. And then also, your journey to where you are now,
Yeah, man.
and about your family as well.
Yeah, had a real stereotypical kind of wonderful childhood. My my grandfather, um well, my great grandfather started a little business in Rhode Island, a pet store, and then my gramps took it over. My father took that business and made it a large distribution business. And then my brother also now has a very, very big business, national business for pet food distribution. And so we had a really nice childhood. My grandfather had a gentleman's farm out in Rehoboth, Massachusetts, which is kind of right over the border of Rhode Island. And my dad back then went to work for my grandfather in the pet store and built a $30,000 raised ranch on the farm, like the things we used to do back in the old days, I guess.
Mhm.
And so we had this wonderful childhood where we had all the toys and the cows and horses and snowmobiles and all that kind of stuff up until I was 12. And then when I was 12 years old, kept complaining to my father about my left foot kept falling asleep, kind of like pins and needles type thing. And finally, probably 6 months of complaining about it, then my knee got quite swollen. So my dad said, let's stop over in East Providence at this walk-in clinic, and we'll see what they say. Thinking that I twisted my knee. I was a typical kid, right? So we walked in, and the doctor there said, we'll take an x-ray. And even at 12 years old, when he walked into the room, even I was aware that something was not right. There was
Mhm.
just an energy. And he said, there's something in there. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm going to send you over. I want to send you over right now to Rhode Island Hospital. And there's a specialist there. So within a couple of weeks, they were sure that it was cancer. It was something called osteogenic sarcoma, which is bone cancer
Mhm.
in my knee, kind of intertwined in my knee and all the bones and all that kind of stuff. And so from one day to the next, it was a new life of hospitals and chemotherapy and kind of whole new world of ultimately they found four tumors in my left lung, tried to save my leg, kind of, without going into too much detail. Fast forward 2 years later, the cancer was in remission, but my leg was no longer healthy enough to try and save any longer. So ultimately they amputated my left leg to the middle of my thigh.
Hmm.
So I have about 19, 20 centimeters of femur bone. And that was when I was 14. It was from 12 to 14. It was kind of this whirlwind of living basically in Boston at Dana-Farber and Boston Children's. And this is always an interesting story for me to tell, because when I tell the story, people are always like, "Oh my God, it must have been terrible." And it's whether it's my personality that I was born with, or whatever the reasons, the age that it happened, because I was still under my parents' kind of thumb. For me, it wasn't really that negative, which sounds so odd, but for me, it was just an experience. It was life. I was the center of attention always. Um, and even the part where I say, they amputated my leg, which for anyone that faces that, it would be perhaps the most tragic thing that happened to them in their lives. For me, it was 2 years of living incredibly sick with this leg that had a staph infection in it and was no longer working. It was just essentially like a dead, thing on me, and was holding me back from the cancer was gone. I had gotten through it, but it was holding me back from moving forward. So for me, even the amputation was like a celebration, again, all kind of, it doesn't sound logical, but that's my truth. At least that's the story that I tell. Sometimes I get confused as to what's real and what's in our head. And, but for me now as a parent, obviously with 4 kids now, when I recognize the hell that my parents went through, right?
Hmm.
So for me, I was the center of attention. I was getting better. Of course, the surgeries, it was all challenging, but when I look back now, I realize that my family, my mom and dad, my older brother, they all assumed that I wasn't going to survive, because it was just kind of one setback after another of finding cancer in my knee, then finding it in my left lung, and then finding it in my right lung. And for whatever reason, I survived. And once they chopped the leg off, man, I was off to the races on figuring out how to walk with a prosthetic. That would have been in '89, and starting my life, again, kind of starting over with challenges. Clearly, being a 15-year-old, I'm a big guy. I've always been a big athletic guy, and the challenge was I couldn't play sports, and I certainly had some limitations, but I was very happy to be alive. And there was no looking back at that point for me. I was very, very much, at least tried very hard to be a normal guy. I certainly was not normal, but I lived life like I was a regular guy. That was my way of handling it, and it worked for me, right?
Yeah. I want to stop you right there, because I'm curious to know, it sounds like you had a pretty good relationship with your parents. Obviously they cared for you and loved you and all those kinds of things, the normal things, right? But bringing up your parents and going through that situation, thinking back, like you said, the hell you were going through, they were going through it just as much, if not more, because their baby, their son,
Yeah.
is possibly, there's a chance that he may not make it, and may not survive. And I mean, I cannot
Yeah.
imagine that as a parent.
It,
And I'm sure you
right.
feel the same. I mean, as a parent, you want to make sure your children are safe and protected. And if anything goes wrong, you want to be there to help them.
Yeah.
But in
Well,
that
it kills
situation,
us.
they can't.
It kills us when they have a cold and they can't
Right.
breathe through their nose. It's like, oh, my baby, yeah, I think, again, I want to say that because of my personality type, I didn't know that, or I didn't recognize how the reality that there was a 99% chance that I was not going to survive. All the people around me were dying. all the people that I was going through it with were dying. The cancer had that the type of chemo that I had, the type of cancer I had, the chemotherapy that they give you has about a 50% cure rate. And if that one doesn't work, there is really no other option. It's kind of experimental. So when the cancer came back in the other lung, it was like, kind of go make some memories. Again, for me, I just, maybe that's why I survived, is I was just like, yeah, okay, no big deal. But for my parents, and again, I didn't learn this until many years later, my parents, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, and even my friends, they were all like, oh yeah, we thought we just assumed you were going to die. And I'm like, really? So I was incredibly naive. um and I I'd imagine that's why I survived, because I was so naive that my brain didn't even go there. It was just like, I'll figure it out. I'm sure I'll be fine. It's kind of interesting to look back. But yeah, just to give an example of that, is there's a bunch of examples that I remember when I was in my teens. I had this conversation with my grandmother. I'm really close with my grandmother. And when I was, let's say, 16, I was already driving. So I must have been 16 and a half. And we had learned about the Great Depression or something in high school. And I went to her house and was visiting with her. And I said, no, I called her Nani. I said, Nani, what was like, I was learning about the Great Depression. Do you remember that? The shortages of food, and what was the worst thing that happened in your life? And she was like, well, I guess you. And I was like, no, really? I thought she was kidding. I was like, no, really? And she's like, no, you. When you got sick, that was probably the hardest thing that me and the family had to face. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that blew my mind. I was like, really? Was it a big deal? So again, it kind of illustrates um how my brain dealt with it. It was, to
Yeah.
me, it was no big deal, man. And meanwhile, I was literally, walking death. When I got sick, I was 130 pounds, a 12 and a half year old boy. And 2 years later, I was 90 pounds of just skin and bones. So, yeah, man, who knows why? But it certainly changed my parent, changed my dad. I think my dad really, to this day, I don't know that he ever recovered from, which is a heavy statement, but I think it really hurt him in a way that I don't know that he recovered from. I think they assumed that I wasn't going to survive, and his way of handling it was to be silly. So he was kind of he quit work for 2 years. He worked for the family. It was his business. And they lived in Boston with me for 2 years, my mom and dad. And my dad's way of dealing with those type of emotions is just to be silly. So he was kind of my rock of keeping things light, joking with all the other kids and the parents and the nurses in the Boston Children's Hospital. And but I think it was tough on him, man. And again,
I'm sure that, yeah, I mean, I'm sure that he was silly, in front of you and in front of other people kind of around you, but I'm sure behind closed doors he was
yeah,
hurting.
which he doesn't talk about. Needless to say, he's a guy's guy type of from a generation that doesn't so much kind of talk about that stuff. But I totally agree. I think it crushed him. And when he went back to the house at night, I think it just and also, again, as I can only recognize these things now that I'm a father, is I was a good, I seemingly had some athletic ability that he was very supportive of up until I was 12 and a half. And, you're just a kid then, but it was still a big part of our relationship of me playing ice hockey. And I think even those dreams, whether they're realistic or not, they're still dreams. And they were kind of crushed from, literally from one day to the next. I never put hockey skates on again.
Right.
And that in itself is a challenge, right? It not just obviously for me, but I think for my dad too, who was the guy that was bringing me, he was the dad that was bringing me to the games and all that stuff. So yeah, man, from a parenting again, and I haven't done a lot of diving into this, which is kind of interesting, right? A lot of these things that we're talking about is almost new to me. Of course I've thought about them, but I haven't, again, because of my personal, I haven't dwelled on them much to really recognize how much I affected the family. My brother also, he took a huge hit at 15 years old. My parents basically left him alone. He quickly became learned to cook and took care of
Right.
himself so yeah, man, and maybe that weighs on me more than I know, right? Maybe there's as we get deeper into this conversation and talk about depression and mental illness, perhaps there's a lot of those things that I have not dug into to understand, subconsciously how much of that stuff affects. But that's we all have those baggages. It's just mine seems to be a little bit uh, more obvious that I haven't really taken the time to understand them as much.
Yeah. Um, Thinking back, and maybe you can't remember anything, but thinking back to those times when you're going through that as a young boy, you have your whole life ahead of you. Then you get this sudden news, and now this has changed. This is going to change your life forever. Having your leg amputated, having to probably get regular checkups to make sure that the cancer hasn't returned, and all those kinds of things. You know that that's in your future. um did you change at all as a boy? Did it impact who you are? Because it seemed like you were pretty upbeat, pretty energetic, very positive young man. Did it change your outlook on your future?
Well, I yes, I would say I don't know, because it's hard to know who the chicken or the egg type thing, uh, nature versus nurture. I think I was probably always going to. I have run into my problems. I have this. I don't want to use the word. I have a flaw in that it's hard for me to take anything too seriously, right? So, and I don't know if I've always been like that, or if that's as a result of facing, perhaps imminent death, at whether it was subconscious or not, when you're 12, 13, 14, and you're perhaps facing the fact that you're not going to survive. um Maybe it did change me, but I know that it's gotten me into trouble. So when you get married, when you make that, just take the plunge to get married and have kids and buy a house and have a mortgage and get a real job and all that stuff, there has to be a certain amount of seriousness, right? Like you can no longer be a kid. You can still be, I think it's still healthy to be silly if that's who you are and make jokes, but some part of you has to step it up. And I don't know that I was able to do that. So I think it's a good question in that I suspect uh one of the reasons I had trouble um kind of being an adult is perhaps I am, or I was, or am a little stuck. And I don't say that really negatively. Using the word flaw is a negative connotations, but it's who I am. I mean, from a career standpoint, when I went to work with my brother for my dad, sooner or later it did catch up with me, because I wasn't serious. And if you want to kind of have a career and be the boss, or manage people, it's at some point you do have to be a little bit more adult. So yeah, I think it probably did affect me, but I've also, it's done me, it served me well, and as a parent, in that I adore my kids. And I just had a wonderful conversation with one of my buddies here. He's in his mid 50s. His two children are grown up, and he was telling me he had these. He's in the Lions Club. I don't know if we have the Lions Club in America, but it's kind of like, do we have that? Do you
Yeah,
know
I
what the
think so.
Lions Club
Yeah,
is?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
I don't
he's
know
in the
if it's still
Lions.
around, but yeah, I know what
He's
it
like a
is.
successful. He's a doctor. He's quite successful in a hobby musician, real good buddy of mine. And he was telling me he spent the day with these 20 somethings. He spent the day with them, and he was amazed at how full of life they were. And I loved the way he told it. He's like, they were just laughing the whole time, and there was no stress. And it dawned on him that he's not like that. It was very interesting to hear him say that. And so he was like, I realize that it's just me. Like I can just wake up in the morning and be in a happier mood. And I'm like, yeah, yes, that's a fair statement. And it dawned on me as he was saying that one of the reasons, as the primary parent now for 14 years, since the day we arrived here in Germany, my wife went back to work and I stayed home. One of the things that perhaps differentiates me from other parents is, from the second I wake up, and I'm a morning person, is I'm goofy from the second I wake up with my kids. So when I wake them up, it's not, hey, it's time to get up. It's some silly joke. It's always something, and it's not planned. It's not like I, sit down and write bits to do
Right
for
out of
my kids,
script.
but it's just, it's just the way it's just the way I am. So when he was telling me that story, I kind of said, yeah, man, I guess that's kind of why I have this type of connection I have with my kids, is I'm never serious with them. My wife is very serious with them. My wife is tough, man. She's a German. She takes no crap from them, never has. They have to ask permission for everything in our household when she's around, which is, that's her way, and we cannot question it in our household. So, but for me, it's they are my best buds. I think I am their best bud. And so, the on one hand, the if what you asked is true, and kind of going through that stuff at a young age has caused some of those personality traits to be what they are, in the end, they've gotten me here, and my 4 kids are wonderful, and they're happy and well adjusted, and it's hard to complain. And I certainly don't look back, and I don't know that I ever have. Maybe there were moments in my life where I was like, man, I wish I had 2 legs. Or and my kids joke, we'll joke about it. They'll be like, what would you be like if you hadn't got sick? And I'm like, I don't know, man, but I don't
Probably
ever
be the
question
same.
it.
You'd probably be the same. Probably be the same. Um, all right. Well, that's cool. Thinking back to your journey through not only the family business, but ultimately making the decision, to move to Germany. I mean, how did that all happen? Let's talk a little bit about that, how that transition happened with you, selling off your portion of the company. And
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is always after it's been 15 years now that I had this kind of falling out with a family member. Uh, we had bought the business from my father together. Not It wasn't inherited. We bought it with the bank's money. And they were, at the time we had my wife and I had, by choice, we had 3 kids in 36 months.
oh, wow.
Which at the time was a great idea. We were like, well, we're older and we want to have, 4 or 5 kids. So let's just do it right in a row. That was not a great idea, because
Right.
we had no fun. Like, having 3 kids in diapers was just not fun. At least for my wife, who's a constantly stressed out anyway. So I had, the household was stressed out. We were loving having the babies, but the experience was just not, we weren't really enjoying our time together. So when I was at work with my brother and these guys that we worked together, we were having a wonderful time. And then at some point, I had this kind of falling out with my brother, and it threw me for a loop. I couldn't handle it. So, I had never, again, this goes back to the way I was wired, I wasn't having fun in the household with my wife and my 3 babies. And then I was having this, these issues at work. So all of a sudden I just, my brain imploded, and I went kind of inward and went into this insane, depressive state that I had never known before. And it was panic attacks, and then ultimately fear of panic attacks. So, the way my depression showed itself was anxiety. So
Mm-hmm.
and essentially I just became the only people I could handle. I was still going to work kind of, but barely. I was just holding up in an office, and it was a big enough business that I could do that. And it, I could just kind of hide, and everyone knew that something wasn't right. And then at home, I was always able to keep it together with the kids. So ultimately my brother finally, we kind of via lawyers and stuff, we decided to separate. And literally from what I called my wife, and I was like, hey, my brother wants to buy my part of the business. What should I do? And I was not I was in no kind of state of mind to be making these type of decisions. But she's like, do it, and let's move to Germany. I'm like, okay, I'll see you when I get home. That's how little and because she knew that I was really in trouble. She has a master's degree in psychology, so you didn't need to have your master's degree in psychology to know that I was really frighteningly not doing well. And I wasn't telling people, and I wasn't talking about it, but it was pretty clear. So it I literally that day I kind of signed the papers, and I never went back. It was so extreme, and there was so much bad blood at that point, and so much kind of anger, and the family business type stuff, that I just never went back. I went home, we packed our stuff, and within like 8 weeks we were in Germany with my 6, 5, and 3-year-old,
Mm.
living in, this is so great, Brian. We moved into the house my wife grew up in, where there was a 98-year-old grandmother. There was my mother-in-law and her new husband, my brother-in-law, his wife, and his 3 kids. And
Wow.
us 5 got thrown into and they found places for us. They were like, we put another bed in this room. You can sleep on this couch. The kids can sleep. And we just did it. It was, in retrospect now, when we look back, we're like, how
Right.
could we possibly have pulled that off? But at the time I was not functioning in any normal way with other people. Although at that point I had gotten on the right, some of the a med. To this day I'm on the same meds. It's called Effexor. So I was on that, and at least no longer kind of in this constant fear of these panic attacks. I was more stable, but had yet to even begin to deal with what I had just experienced, which was, which at least for me, it showed itself in one emotion, which is shame. I was completely ashamed of failing, and you know and kind of falling into this depression. So I had a lot of work to do, but yeah, we moved into this home, and they were so wonderful to my kids, who we didn't speak, I didn't speak German, my 3 kids didn't speak German. And but as you can imagine, kids are so amazing how quickly they learn. We threw them into the little kindergarten in our village, and within a month they were speaking German to each other in the household. I was like, wait, what are you guys saying? Because I don't understand. Like, kids are crazy, right? The way they can learn. I'm like,
That's awesome.
how do you say car? They're like, auto. I'm like, no, I forget that one.
um, so do you think that when you realize that, you were going through these, mental struggles, Was it attributed to the business? Was it attributed to the fallout with the family member? Was it a mixture of both? Maybe it just wasn't something you really wanted to do with your life. Have you thought about what that issue was?
Yeah, I've done that. I've done a lot of work. So I think it was gonna, first of all, it's so funny. Once once I finally started talking about it, and it took me a few years to at least start to get to the point where I needed to tell people that I had gone through this and um be more true to who I am, which is an open book. I didn't want to be hiding this fact. Then I realized that my father's entire side, cousins, aunts, uncles, they're all on some sort of antidepressant,
Hmm.
specifically with anxiety. So, there's clearly a genetic link. I think I probably would have, I was in my mid 30s, and that's the right age for it to happen. I think I probably would have sooner or later had to deal with this stuff no matter what. The fact that all those stressors happened all at once, and again, kind of back to what we talked about, of me just not having, not really having the tools to deal with all those stressors appropriately, and that is the stuff that I was ashamed of, that I didn't have those tools. I am not anymore, because it's just, it's just how it is. Some people can handle stuff, some people can't. I couldn't handle it, and for too many years I blamed other people outwardly, which is very typical. I don't do that anymore. I don't think the family member, I think all of it worked itself out in the end. And um yeah, it was a tough time, man, but
Yeah.
I think it was going to happen no matter what. And it's just part of who I am now.
So you guys moved to Germany, and is that mainly because your wife's from Germany? That was why she wanted to move there.
Well, I think she sensed that I needed to get out of Dodge, right? I think she sensed that in order for me, and I can't express how sick I was. I was really, really at the end of wanting to be on the earth anymore. So I think she knew, the world we come from is so, the family business is so kind of all, it's all encompassing. It's our whole world there. So if all of a sudden I wasn't going to be working for the family business, it would have been a very challenging for me to kind of find a new identity there. So I think she just, first of all, she always wanted to bring the kids there for at least a year, which it was always kind of in the plan somehow, maybe. So when the opportunity came, it was a no-brainer for her. But I also think she's no dummy, and I'm not, in retrospect, I'm not sure that our marriage would have survived had I stayed there.
Mm.
I think it's by making that choice to come here, and I don't know that we expected to stay for 14 years, but maybe it's the only way that our marriage could have survived, because our roles are so extremely um non-traditional, in that I have, when I say I take care of the family, it's very, in a very traditional way, just simply roles reversed. So
Right.
my wife doesn't do laundry, she doesn't do
Right.
clean the kitchen, she doesn't go shopping, uh and I am perfectly, incredibly happy with that. I like doing laundry. I'm, call me crazy, but I'm cool with that. So um the fact that she's a strong personality, and I am not a strong personality in some ways, it's allowed for our marriage to not only work for now going on, what, 22 years, um but I think it's certainly, it's blossomed here because we did find our roles. And when you're close to family, sometimes when you're close to friends and family, your relationship becomes so um you worry as much what they think as you do about the actual relationship. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure if I'm communicating that correctly,
Mhm.
but because my wife's tough, I don't know that my family in America could understand our relationship. What I learned with distance and being here is they don't need to understand. No one needs to understand my relationship with my wife. It's at me, right? I mean, the fact that she's a strong personality, the fact that she's not American in that she doesn't play nice. You know, I think
Mhm.
Americans generally play nice more than other cultures anyway. So I think the only way our marriage works is that we get away from all those kind of those eyes uh that perhaps we put too much weight. You know, in the end, it doesn't matter what my mom thinks of my relationship with my wife. It doesn't matter
Mhm.
what my brother or my best buds even. It's kind of like, hey man, I love my wife, and we were raising our kids together, and this is how it is, and I'm if I'm cool with that, that's all that matters, right? So I think yeah, I give her a lot of credit, man. When you know is and it's not all roses, man. You know, I mean that
Right. Right.
it's certainly not all ever easy. Are so incredibly different. Our personalities, you know, we're just from two completely different worlds, and we live. You know, she has kind of this world of volleyball where that's she has her buds and she has her activities, and that's not my world. And I have my world of I'm a musician, so I kind of have my world of music and all that. And those worlds don't collide. Like on remember the Seinfeld episode?
Right.
The
Right.
worlds are colliding, Jerry.
Right.
It's we just have separate lives, but in the end, when we sit on the couch together at night and the kids are asleep, it's after 32 years, it still works. And that is saying something, man.
Right. No, absolutely. I want to ask you this, and then I want to dive into a little bit about your music and stuff. But thinking back about going through depression and anxiety and having those issues that you were battling personally. I want to ask you this question because there may be parents out there that are doing the same thing. They're fighting this mental battle with depression or anxiety while trying to take care of kids, while trying to
Yeah.
raise their kids. What advice could you give to parents out there that maybe are going through something similar and how to deal with raising kids while going through it?
Yeah. I mean, the easiest one is ask for help. I mean, that my
Mm.
the only mistake I ever made in my life. Nah, I've made too many, but the one big one is I just waited so long to ask for help and to talk about the fact that I was hurting so much, you know. Luckily I didn't turn to drugs or alcohol, but uh at the time, man, I was there was so much pain, you know. And recently I have a family member a young family member in her 20s that's going through depression, and my 19-year-old daughter was like she was asking about it, and she was like, I don't understand how she can be sad. We're at our age, it's like she has everything. And I was like, my daughter's name is Kaya. I was like, Kaya, no, you can't understand. You
Right.
could never understand, because depression is so illogical. You know, the pain is so incredibly kind of specific, and it makes no sense because it's like, well, what's hurting? How are you sick? None of it makes any sense, but it's so real, right? So I think my only suggestion would be, man, reach out for help. It's so easy to find people that can help you very quickly, with meds, and secondly with just talking about it and saying, hey, you ain't alone. You know, half the people in the neighborhood are probably on some sort of meds trying to get through life, because life is complicated, and it's complicated. It's even more complicated when you have when you're married and you have kids, right? It's the
Yeah.
ultimate stressor.
I think when you say that, I think that being a dad and being kind of the man of the house, one thing that comes to mind when you talk about asking for help is there may be men out there that go, if I ask for help, Carlos, it's going to make me look like a failure. Like I couldn't do it myself.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
exactly.
what, how do you comment to that?
Yeah, that's the one. That's it, man. That's the shame that I am aware of to this very day. And I struggle, and I would imagine I'll always struggle with feeling like a failure. That is also illogical because I'm not a failure. I live a good life. I'm a good person. I have, I love my family and I love my neighbors, and there's a lot of things in that I do every day that make me not a failure. Regardless, I struggle with the fact that I don't make a lot of money. So, I don't have a job and a career that I financially uh, am in a position that I can have fancy cars. None of that stuff matters. So, I mean, it does matter in some way because it still affects me and still causes me these feelings of not being successful. But that is, I don't know if it's just a man issue, right? Perhaps female moms also are dealing with that stuff, but I think it is definitely a man issue that that we all, I would imagine we all face, right? Is but once you're in that place, and once you get in that dark place and you're kind of you're in that prison, um the worst thing you can do is to not ask for help. And facing the fact that, you know facing the fact that you need help to get out of it is just part of it. It's part of the journey, right? It is not a failure, and sooner or later you can work through those emotions. But the first step, and I know it was hard as hell for me. I can remember I was going to see a psychiatrist, like a guy that was kind of like for executives. And I was just lying to him. I went to him a bunch of times. I was like, I'm doing great. No, 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 everything's, I'm doing great. Meanwhile,
Mm,
I'm dying inside,
yeah.
dying. And then finally, when I faced there was a trigger that finally happened that I was like, okay, I need to get help or I'm not gonna make it. And so I went in and told this guy, and he's like, oh, he kind of like his shoulders sagged. He's like, oh, why didn't you just tell me, man? I'm gonna put you on, Xanax or whatever it was, Klonopin, the kind of the typical stuff. He's like, and you're gonna feel better immediately. And I was like, yeah, I don't know, I don't know, man. Like, I'm just a dumb guy. And but yeah, when you find someone that you can trust and ask for help, it gets better, right?
Mm. Yeah, it's we should always ask for help when we need it, because as we know, raising kids takes a village, and
Yeah.
we can't do it alone. Some people struggle through it, and some people manage, but having a partner with us to help us through that, and family and stuff around is super important. So I'm glad that
Yeah,
you
and
took.
Brian, yeah,
Go ahead.
in
Go ahead.
this generation also, correct me if I'm wrong, but our generation, it feels like we are doing more because there often isn't a village.
Mhm.
Like not only is there not a village, but the expectation, kind of this helicopter parenting is so normal or almost expected at this point. So it's like twofold. It's like, no, you don't have family and like you used to, living next to you to support you. And oh, by the way, you're expected to be all in all the time, man. So it's like parenting is hard. I feel
Yeah.
like I don't know that it was ever easy, but
Yeah.
I know, I feel like when I was a kid, like, my aunts and my cousins were always at my grandparents' house and we were always together. And and now I look back and I hear there was also issues within the aunts and within the, but there was at least a camaraderie there, and there was certainly a village. So yeah, man, it's hard.
Hmm.
It can sometimes, it ain't so fun, but we all get through it.
Yeah, I hear you. Thinking back to how you eventually got through the things that you were going through, was music always a part of your life? Or is it just something you kind of picked up because you didn't know what else to do?
Yeah. Music was always part of my life. I was kind of always writing, and I always was one of those people that always had a notebook with me, kind of always, you know, not for any particular reason, just kind of always writing and jotting stuff down. Um and I'm a bass player, and a decent bass player. And I kind of, it was quite intentional, when I got married. And so I was in band, I was in bad rock bands and all that kind of stuff, all the typical things. And when I got married and bought the house and went to work, I very intentionally put my bass, my upright bass, my electric bass, I put it all in the basement. And it was like, okay, that part is over, because now I'm going to be a father and an adult. And I think that that was not a mistake, but that's a dangerous that was a dangerous decision, because
Mm.
it brings me, music always have and always will brings me so much joy.
Hmm.
And that creativity is so important to me. I don't know that I knew how important it was, but when we went to pack up our uh the container and our minivan. We had a Nissan, one of those minivans back in 2009. Um, I remember I told my wife I'm going to sell my upright bass, and because I'm not going to bring it to Germany, and she was like, "No, bring it." And I was like, I'm not really a musician. She's like, "No, bring it." Very clear. She's like, "No, I think you should bring your stuff." And I'm like, "Okay." And the second we arrived here, I started playing again. I started practicing again, and I immediately found this wonderful violinist from Bulgaria, and a German woman that we put a trio together playing kind of klezmer and Eastern European music, and like immediately started gigging. And
Mm.
this was when I was really struggling. I was still kind of making sense of what had happened and all this kind of stuff, but one thing I knew was, oh, I'm playing music again. Like, that was one thing I knew I could do. I was comfortable being on stage, and and from there it snowballed to me really becoming much more intentional in the writing, of saying, oh, I want to challenge myself to see if I can write songs. And so I think music for me, it's everything. It's my or the creative process in general is everything to me. It keeps me sane. It keeps me kind of uh constantly looking to find I'm a big reader, so reading and writing and all that stuff, it has to be in my life. I didn't know that then. I know that now. And I was blessed in 2017. I decided to songwriting has been a huge part of my life now for the last decade. But in 2017, I decided I was going to try and write a book. My kids were at that age. They would have been in their my daughters would have been in 15, something like that. And we were buying them a lot of books for Christmas, like young adult books, like Fault of the Stars and all those type of things. And I would read anything we bought them, I would read. And I was like, I think I could write a book about, like, I'm watching my daughters grow up. I'm very, I'm very aware of everything they're going through. I'm watching them have their first boyfriends. I'm watching them have, their all this stuff. And I was like, I think I could write a book. How hard could it be? Literally, that was my thought process. That was Christmas of 2016. So January 2017, I started every single day for 18 months. I wrote on my computer and, finished this book. It's not a great book. I'm not Shakespeare, but I did it every day, and super, super proud that that's something that I have in my hands. And friends and family read it, and they are excited as I am. And those are the
What's the
type of
book
things
called?
where it's called Songs for Ivy. And The main character is a 16-year-old young lady that plays volleyball, and there's a bunch of kind of characters there's 5 stories that are interwoven, and they're just all people that have made an impression upon me in my life.
That's cool.
All the people that kind of that shaped me, right? Good and bad. I tend to be interested in the darker side of human nature. So my best buds, some of them have gone through drug addiction, some of them have gone through stuff that for whatever reason, that's what draws me in. So but I'm super proud of the book, and yeah, man, please, all your listeners, go order it. I need a few bucks, man. I got 4 kids in college.
Yeah. What are your kids' ages again? What's their names?
Yeah. I got my oldest daughter is Fiona. She's 21. She's at a school in Miami. I got a 20-year-old daughter, Kaya. She's at a school in Valdosta, Georgia. And I got a 18-year-old boy who is, I'm like a normal dude, normal height guy. My wife's normal height. He's 6'7". How bizarre is that? So it's so weird. No, everyone's like, wait, that's your kid? He is on a volleyball scholarship at a school outside of New York City in New Rochelle. And then I have a 12-and-a-half-year-old son. So we got 4 kids, and 3 of them are in the States studying.
Oh, that's cool. And
they're all on full volleyball scholarships. I haven't had to spend a dime on college yet.
Oh, that is awesome. That is
what
awesome.
A blessing is that?
Right. Before I let you go, Carlos, I just want to ask you, what advice could you give to dads particularly, but parents in general? What advice could you give to them about, your parenting or parenting in general?
Yeah. Boy, in the end, how much of it is luck. And, I don't know that I'm the greatest dad in the world. I don't know that I give the best advice, but I give as much love as I can to my 4 babies, and to my wife as well. And that's all I can do, right? I for all my flaws and the good and bad that is in me, I just try to do the right thing by them every day. And at least up until now, we have done really well. And I'm so damn proud of those kids, and proud of my wife, proud of my relationship as well.
That's awesome. Well, Carlos, where's the best place that my listeners, viewers can look you up, learn a little bit more about you?
Yeah, I made a wonderful album. I spent 6 months in Chicago last year, and I made an amazing album with a guy named Bryan, a producer. My first time making a real professional album with real studio musicians, and we had a blast. And that album is out there streaming everywhere. It's under an artist named C.K. Baker Band, and the new album's called Find Your Way. So those are all my songs, and I sing and play bass. And yeah, go check out check out the album, and then please buy my book, Songs for Ivy. It's an interesting read. It's an easy read. It's a young adult book, so it's not fine prose, but It is what it is.
Yeah. Awesome. I'll make sure that all that stuff's in the show notes. But listen, Carlos, it's been great getting to know you.
Yeah,
exciting that you're clear on the other side of the world, talking and sharing your story. And I'm looking forward to continuing our friendship.
Yeah, I'm going to come in and visit you in Cali, man. I'm going to go buy you a beer.
Let's do it. Well, I appreciate you. Thanks for being on, man. I really do appreciate everything that you represent, and keep living life.
Thank you, sir.
Hey guys, this has been another episode of Dad Up. I really appreciate my good friend Carlos Baker for being on. Make sure you guys go order his book. Make sure you guys check out his music. You can learn a little bit more about him in the show notes. And as I tell you always, if you have not yet subscribed to my show, please make sure you do that so you don't miss any of the awesome guests that I have on each and every week. And as always, I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode of Dad Up. Wow, another amazing episode in the books. So much was shared, and I'm truly grateful my guest was able to pour into you to help you elevate your dad game and really dad up.
Make sure you bang that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're here, please don't forget to leave me a rating and a review. I always appreciate the feedback. And one last thing, don't forget, your role as a dad is one of the most important roles you have. So if you need a little help or have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website at daduptribe.com or at my Instagram page at daduppodcast. Until next time, everyone, dad up.